The Washington Commanders season won't be defined by Jaden Daniels' injury, but by how Marcus Mariota manages the offense against a Las Vegas Raiders team desperately in need of finding itself. That and more right now on Crossover Thursday.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome inside a Crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Raiders. I'm David Harrison, host of Locked On Commanders, covering the Washington Commanders for WUSA 9. Here with you 5 days a week. He is your boy Q, host of Locked On Raiders and Raider Nation Radio 920. Also with Raider Nation 5 days a week. You can find me on X at DHarrison82. You can find Q at your boy Q254. Thank you for making Locked On Commanders and Locked On Raiders your first listen or view of the day. A special thank you goes out to all the everydayers for both shows, those of you who come through for every single episode. If it's your first time checking out a crossover episode, thanks for joining us. Hopefully you like what you hear from each of us or both of us, and you come back again real soon. Coming up on today's episode, we're going to give you the keys to victory for both sides of this Week 3 matchup. We're going to break down the matchups that can decide the game. But first, we're getting into the biggest storylines facing each team heading into Week 3. All of that on today's Crossover Thursday episode, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're doing that thanks to our friends over at PrizePicks. Crossover Thursday is presented by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. The Washington Commanders season has not gone off to the start that everybody kind of hoped it would. And Week 3, along with the year, certainly not going to be defined by the Jaden Daniels injury, though that is obviously the big news. We are expecting Marcus Mariota at this point to start this weekend against the Las Vegas Raiders, a Raiders team, Q, that needs to find themselves, right? 1-1 after two very different performances. So what is the biggest focus for this team to find some consistency?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. They've got to figure out who they really are. Like, what's their real identity with this team this year? You saw the Week 1 against the Patriots, and the offense looked really good. Geno Smith threw the ball around for 362 yards and looked great. And then on Monday against the Chargers, couldn't get any offense going. And so it was a big question. All they did is have 3 field goals on the day. So the big question is, who is this team going to be offensively, and how do they get the ground game going? I think that's going to end up being the biggest storyline is how do they get this ground game going? Go out and draft a hotshot rookie at number 6 overall in Ashton Jeanty that had 2,600 plus yards last year at Boise State in college and was there in New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony. Didn't win it, but still was out there. I mean, he was in consideration. So they draft this guy, no one Pete Carroll, no one Chip Kelly. Everyone says run, 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 run. You're going to see a lot of that. Well, he got 19 carries Week 1 for 38 yards and only had 11 carries on Monday night for 43 yards. So they haven't really had the ground game and the ground attack, and they haven't had as many carries as Raider Nation would like. And I'm sure that the Raiders would like to have a little bit more as well. So they got to find a way to be able to establish the run and start to get what they expected to get out of Ashton Jeanty when they drafted him number 6 overall, which, obviously is going to be a big storyline, especially based off of, what is Washington going to do when it comes to trying to slow down the run, right? Are they going to load up the box and say, beat us some other way? Or are they going to see if the Raiders have an ability to actually run the ball like they want to?
Yeah, and that's something that, early on in the season was I say early on, like we're not still early on in the season, right? But Week 1 was a pretty good, outing for the Washington Commanders defense, able to kind of bottle up that Giants rushing attack and do all those things. And then I don't know if anything went right against the Green Bay Packers in Week 2 on Thursday Night Football, but the run defense certainly wasn't like the biggest glaring problem for this Washington Commanders defense. So when you hear, the Raiders coaches and I think Pete Carroll specifically saying, well, part of the solution is just giving him the ball more, that kind of is yeah, please give him the ball more, because the Washington Commanders feel pretty confident that they're going to be able to kind of handle that if that's what the Las Vegas Raiders decide to do. Truthfully, the Washington Commanders, I mean, they're not going to say this publicly, obviously, but I think observers at least are more concerned about whether or not the Las Vegas Raiders are just going to find a way to get Brock Bowers free. Q, we watched him on Monday night, right? Obviously did not look like the same Brock Bowers that you usually see when he doesn't have that brace on. How is he looking, right now? Obviously, we still have a few days left until the game, but how is he looking at this point as far as his recovery is concerned?
I mean, he's still limited in practice, right? He's still running around with the brace on. So, I mean, it's not something that he likes. He talked to us about it on Saturday in the locker room as they were preparing for Monday with the Chargers. He said, look, I'll do whatever it takes for me to get out there and play, but it's not really comfortable. I don't really like it. And you saw how he was hampered, right? He was not his self on Monday night against the Chargers. He had 5 catches, but he only had about 38 yards. There was absolutely no yards after the catch. It was basically catch the ball and get down. And so that's not what Brock Bowers is all about. That's not what he brings to the table. So at some point, the Raiders have to make a decision. Is he healthy enough to go out there and be a difference maker? Or is he just going out there and being a glorified decoy? I personally would prefer him to just go ahead and sit it on down if he can't be closer to the Brock Bowers that we expect him to be, just because you want him healthy for the majority of the season. It's early, man. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And right now they're only going into week 3. So if he can't go, similar to, I guess, Jaden Daniels there in Washington, if he can't go, he just can't go. You rather have him for the long haul than the short success.
Yeah, 100%. Look, we're on the same page there because you talk about Jaden Daniels, man. I've said this already on Locked On Commanders this week. If you tell me that if the Commanders don't have Jaden Daniels week 3, they will lose to the Raiders. They will be 1-2, no matter what anybody else does. There's not 22 other guys that are going to be on the field at any given time that are not Jaden Daniels that have anything to do with this. If Jaden doesn't play, the Commanders lose. I'm still going to tell you to sit Jaden Daniels. I'm going to say that that's how important he is for week 4 through however long this season lasts for the Commanders. So yeah, you still sit him down for week 3 and you just take your L if you have to. But of course we know that's not how this game works, right? But the injury bug, brother, like week 2, man, the injury bug, it was not a bug. It was an injury monster. They lost Dietrich Wise.
That injury report was incredible.
It was one of the longest week 3 injury reports I've ever seen. But on top of that, Dietrich Wise Jr. lost for the season. Austin Eckler lost for the season. Jonathan Jones put on IR. He's not lost for the season. DQ says he'll come back, but obviously he's not coming back for week 3. And oh, by the way, Sam Cosmi, who got injured last year, is still not back because he's on IR. So he's going to miss up until at least week 5. He'll be back as early as week 5. So the injury bug has already bitten the Commanders. And then, like you said, that injury report, I think there's 7 dudes on that injury report, and none of them is a nothing burger, right? Like you have 3 guys that were rest days. So obviously those are okay. But the rest of those guys, like every single one of those guys legitimately has a chance to miss this football game. But Jaden is, of course, the one that we're all going to talk about. I'll tell you right now, Q, obviously, if anybody else hasn't already picked up on it, I fully expect Marcus Mariota to start this game. I don't expect Jaden Daniels to be out there for this game because kind of like you said about Brock, Dan Quinn has a history of slow rolling it with injuries, being extra cautious. And he mentioned there's a ton of markers, whether strength, agility, speed, those types of things before Jaden can even hit the practice field. And he said without any type of doubt, Jaden has to practice this week before he will even come close to feeling comfortable sending him out there on the field on Sunday. And we've only got 2 practices left. I don't see Jaden practicing, at least not in full, before the end of the weekend. And so I just don't see it coming together for week 3, which means, I don't know, Marcus Mariota revenge game could be on the line in week 3.
Yeah, it very well could be. And, it's funny because I had some people that, are covering the Raiders as well and wondering and talking about Marcus because obviously we knew who he was when he was a member of the Silver and Black. But where is he at this stage of the game? I know he got some burn last season. Where is he in his career? Like, what does he bring to the table? I know he's got like similarities as far as somewhat skill sets. So Jaden, he's not Jaden. Yeah. So where is he at this stage of the game in your opinion?
Yeah, definitely more of a pocket presence than Jaden Daniels is, right? Like still mobile enough. I don't think you're going to see, if it's a Marcus Mariota-led offense, I don't think it's going to be as much different as it is just altered, which I know they're kind of synonyms, right? Altered is still different, but hopefully you get like the levity of what I'm saying. Yeah. Not as much read option, right? I think you still will get some read option because Marcus can still certainly do some of those things, but I don't think you're going to get near as much. And then obviously you're going to want to lean on the running game as much as you possibly can, which is a little bit dicey with Jeremy McNichols, one of the running backs on the injury report today. So I think that's kind of what you're going to get. But I think the great thing for Marcus right now, and just so all the Raider Nation understands, this is not a revenge game for Marcus if and when he does play against the Raiders because he has no ill will for one. Plus, most of the people outside, he mentioned Max. He talked to me today about Max Crosby at length. Obviously, very, very glowing comments about Max Crosby. But a lot of the people that were there when he was there are no longer there anyway. But I think the greatest thing, Q, for Marcus is there's no pressure, right? Like he doesn't need to be the savior of a franchise. He's no longer the number 2 pick that, not the Raiders, but another team invested in. And there's really no inkling that he could possibly be the future of this franchise. So it's really kind of just an opportunity for him to go out there, play ball, be loose, sling the ball around, because he knows no matter what he does, week 4, everyone's going to be hoping that Jaden's back on the field.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's the guy. Jaden is the dude. Everyone knows that he's the franchise. He's the guy that brought new life to the Commanders. As you know, I don't have to tell you, the fan base and everything. I mean, just a fantastic quarterback. been a big fan of his for a long time. So I'm happy that he's having success in the league. And you just want to have that guy healthy no matter what. And honestly, I know it's a different level, but Brock Bowers is the same guy for the Raiders, right? He's that stinking good. You just want him to make sure he's healthy. You don't want to hurt him for the long term. That's for sure.
Jaden and Brock Bowers, both the centerpieces of my fantasy team. So you know what? If I got to miss both of them for week 4, I'd rather have them for week 5 and the rest of the season as well. So the opinion goes double on all sides of the conversation. So while the headlines are going to focus on who's behind center for Washington, this game is ultimately going to be won or lost in the trenches, where both teams have clear advantages and disadvantages that could be exploited on Sunday afternoon. That and more coming up on this crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Raiders, Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Raiders is brought to you today by Mazda, and Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. You know, in segment 1, we talked about the adversity facing both the Commanders and the Raiders this week, whether it's injuries forcing the next player to step up or an entire unit trying to find its footing. The teams that succeed are the ones that stay prepared and confident in their plan. That's the same philosophy Mazda puts into every vehicle that they make. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August of 2025. From footwork to breath work, athletes sweat all the details, and Mazda brings this same intention to how they craft every model. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like the players, Mazda sweats every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. The big names are obviously an important part of every matchup every weekend in the National Football League, but the most interesting parts of the game are specific strengths and weaknesses, those head-on matchups that are going to determine who controls the line of scrimmage. It's no secret, Q, that the trenches have a big factor in deciding every single game in the NFL. But from your perspective, what are the key one-on-one battles that are going to decide this game for the Raiders?
Well, I'm really interested to see Terry McLaurin against the Raiders secondary, wherever he lines up, whoever's across from him, whether that's Caillou Blue Kelly, who's only going to be getting his 3rd ever career start in the National Football League, or Eric Stokes, a former first-round pick of the Green Bay Packers, who've done pretty well so far through 2 games for the Raiders. I just want to see, because as you'll know, and you obviously know, Terry McLaurin hasn't had that scary Terry game yet. Right. And so I'm wondering, when is he going to have that moment? Obviously missing training camp, as he was waiting for that contract extension and not getting out there, getting that burn. I expected him to get a little bit of a slow start. Does he break out of it? Does he get on the same page? And then how does the injury to Jaden Daniels affect that? Right. Is this not a game where he's going to break out like that because maybe he's not on the same page with Marcus Mariota, if in fact he does end up getting the start on Sunday? But that's one of the big keys I'm looking at. I want to see how the Raiders secondary goes up against scary Terry McLaurin and see if he can be that guy. And then, with that being said, Deebo Samuel as well. I know he's not, Deebo that had the walk-up music and scared everybody. And, he's a game wrecker like he was in San Francisco, but he's still a damn good player, right? So, I mean, how do the Raiders slow him down? How does he go from being kind of that guy that's all around, just does like a jack of all trades? How do they go about slowing him down? How can he wreck the game? And if Jaden's out, how much more do they maybe put on his plate as well to be more of a dynamic guy? So I'm really looking at those playmakers, Scary Terry and Deebo Samuel, and see how the Raiders match up with them defensively.
Yeah, 100%. And, I think there's obviously something to be said in every game, whether it's won or lost, about the scheme and the players and the execution of the scheme and all those things. But I was really surprised in week 2 how much Cliff Kingsbury really kind of cut the field in half on his offense. Like how many times they just, flooded one side of the field with routes, but then had either nothing or basically nothing on the opposite side of the field, essentially doing half of the defense's job for them. I'm looking forward to more, he's an air raid guy, right? Like that's Cliff Kingsbury's reputation is air raid. Well, the spirit of air raid, not necessarily the design, but the spirit of air raid is to use the entirety of the field. So to see an air raid coach cut the field in half on his own offense was a little bit jarring, a little bit surprising. And I wonder if maybe he thought, well, the Packers will be surprised too, and they won't see it coming, and almost maybe outplayed himself, maybe tricked himself just a little bit. So against the Raiders, I'm looking forward to seeing them maybe try to spread the ball a little bit more, use the majority of the field on every single play. And that's what a guy like Deebo does for you, but also rookie receiver Jalen Lane. I think he's a guy that, I don't know if week 3 is going to be like a coming out party, so to speak, but he is definitely a guy that I think the Raiders, which, I like to say, Q, if I know it, the coaches already know. So I would like to say that if I know that Jalen is showing himself as a potential threat, the Raiders defensive staff certainly knows that as well, and we'll be on the lookout for it. But fans may be a little bit surprised to see this guy that, some Raiders fans who don't watch Virginia Tech football may not know who Jalen Lane is. You might find out on Sunday. Someone that I think a lot of us know who he is Zach Ertz for one reason or another, whether he's played against your team, for your team, or just because he's one of those guys. I'm looking forward to seeing how he matches up against the Raiders linebackers and safeties. And look, I don't want to get too cute about it, right? But Jeremy Chin, former commander, we all thought he'd be back. I mean, he flat out told me, locker room clean out day, if I can be back, I will be back. Well, I happen to know the Commanders offered him a contract, so I don't know what happened between there and Vegas, but obviously it wasn't as clear cut as that. It rarely is, right? But it's not even so much Ertz against Jeremy Chin. But I know Hunter Henry, 5 catches, 56 yards, and a touchdown. That's kind of a Zach Ertz stat line, right? So I want to see if Zach Ertz can replicate that kind of production against this Raiders defense.
Yeah, no, it's a good matchup to look at and pay attention to. And so far, Jeremy Chin dealing with a pec injury as well. So he was limited in practice. So we'll see how he continues to evolve. But his leadership is needed on the field, and especially, when he lines up in that big nickel type position and just have his defensive presence there. The other thing about it is when you look at the Raiders linebackers, but if it was Elandon Roberts, if it's, Devin White, Jamal Adams, Jermaine Pratt, these guys aren't necessarily, the guys that you're just talking about and hammering home when you're talking about in coverage. Now they are really good getting downhill and stopping the ball carrier. Like, that's, to me, and I've been saying it for a while, that's the strength of the Raiders defense, is stopping the run. That's the goal. Stop the run and then allow their guys to go pin their ears back and try to get to the quarterback, like a Malcolm Kuntz, like a Tyree Wilson, obviously a Max Crosby. That's what they want to do. That's their game plan. That's kind of how this Patrick Graham defense is orchestrated. So I want to see if they're able to stop the run, make the Commanders a little bit one-dimensional. And if, Zach Ertz gets really heavily involved, who's the one who matches up with him? Would it be Jeremy Chin? Will it be someone else? Like, that's going to be a big question and definitely a heck of a matchup to pay attention to.
Yeah, 100%. You mentioned Devin White, man. Look, this. I used to cover Devin White when he was with the Buccaneers. I'm happy to see him get another opportunity to make a run at it in the NFL. But it's hard for me to ignore remembering all those times he got burned in coverage for one reason or another. And just look at the Commanders' offense. And, Cliff Kingsbury's watched a lot of tape. He literally watches every rep of every game, every season, and during the offseason, which is insane to me. So I know he's seen Devin White in pass coverage as well. If you can get Devin White in coverage on some of these receivers or tight ends, I think that's a big opportunity for you to exploit weakness. But I'm also looking at the outside zone run game, Q. Again, small sample size, right? But right now, the Raiders are allowing 7.5 yards per carry on outside runs. And I'm hoping you can shine a little bit of light. Like, is that a real weakness, or is there like a few explosive runs that make that average higher? And that's not something the Commanders will probably be able to take advantage of on Sunday. I
mean, it's a few runs that they've given up that have been, obviously less than ideal for them. It's also been a few runs by the quarterbacks as well, being able to get out of harm's way and get out of the pocket and pick up some yardage. So I think that the biggest strength for the Raiders defense is their rush defense. That's what they want to do. That's where they want to hang their hat. And I'll tell you, Devin White's actually done a really good job so far. Small sample size, only been 2 games, but he's done really good. He was their leading tackler week 1, especially when Elandon Roberts went down. He kind of took over. And then week 2, I thought he did a really good job as well. He's had some TFLs. So Devin White, he basically had the last couple of years off. Philadelphia didn't do anything. Houston, he didn't do anything. But he looks like he's healthy. He's got his legs back under him. John Spytek, as you know, was in Tampa Bay when they drafted Devin White, and he said he's so happy to be back with John Spytek. He's like family to him, so he knows the opportunity that he's been given. He's been playing at a really high level. I've actually been pleasantly surprised with what I've seen from Devin White. But yeah, I think that some of those numbers that you may see in the rushing attack and what the Raiders are giving up may be a little skewed because of quarterbacks. Yeah,
100%. Yeah, I noticed Devin that week 2 game, and I was happy to see him doing a really good job. I noticed Jeremy as well. I was really happy to see him doing it, his thing as well. So matchups are one thing, execution is a whole other, and the team that wins on Sunday simply is just going to have to execute better and avoid costly mistakes. Those keys coming up next on today's Crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Raiders, Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders, Locked On Raiders, brought to you partially by 5-Hour Energy. And 5-Hour Energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee, plus B vitamins and nutrients with zero sugar and 0 crashes. What I love most is how portable they are. big taste, tiny shot. You can take it anywhere and get that boost whenever you need it. When I'm getting ready to break down these key matchups on Sundays, like watching to see if the Commanders running backs can get to the edge or if the Raiders pass rush is going to get home, I need to be locked in. I always reach for my favorite flavor, apple bash, because it's refreshing and gives me that quick lift before a busy day. Honestly, I love how fast it kicks in and the fact that it's sugar-free, so I don't have to worry about crashing later on in the fourth quarter. So enough with boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5-hour energy shots. Get your favorites, the ones you love, be bold, try something new, whatever it is, in store, online, 5hourenergy.com, or go to Amazon today. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Raiders also brought to you in part by PrizePicks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I, we make decisions every single day, but on PrizePicks, being right means that you can cash in on those decisions. With football back, PrizePicks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes, all in less than 60 seconds. I've been playing PrizePicks lately, and it's such a fun way to stay locked in on all these matchups we're talking about. It's quick, it's easy, and honestly, it's one of my favorite ways to follow along with football. Instead of just watching the game, you can dive into the numbers. Think a running back is going to break one loose against that edge defense. You can pick more or less on those rushing yards. Think a veteran tight end has a favorable matchup. Check out their projection for receiving yards or receptions. You can even look at quarterbacks' passing yard projections and decide if the defensive line is going to give them trouble. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. The path to victory in week 3 for both the Commanders and the Raiders, surprisingly straightforward if each or both or either team can stay disciplined. So Q, let's start with the Raiders. If they're going to leave the East Coast with a win in their carry-on luggage on Sunday, what are the 3 things that they absolutely have to do against the Commanders?
Well, first and foremost, they got to stop handing the ball to the other team, right? I mean, Geno Smith has 4 interceptions so far in the season and only 1 touchdown pass. So he's got to stop throwing it to the other team. And the reason he's doing that, it's not like he's just been bad with his accuracy, but he's been trying to take some shots. He's been trying to force the ball into, double coverage, triple coverage, trying to get into his playmakers' hands. On Monday through 3 interceptions. And he told us that he was impatient. He was just trying to get it all back in one shot, and you just can't do that. And so protect the ball. It's all about the ball. So that's the first and foremost that they have to do, is make sure they protect the ball. Secondly, they've got to establish the run game. The run game has not been where anyone expected it to be at this stage of the game. Pete Carroll has told us that they need to continue to work at it and grind at it. And, they're easing Ashton Genty into the mix, but I don't think that you drafted a number 6 overall to ease him in. I think that the offensive line and Ashton Genty need as much work together as possible, and the way to do it is on-the-job training. And that means get the ball and get it to him, put it in his belly in the game early and often, and let him get familiar with that offensive line. Hopefully, Jackson Powers-Johnson is back this week. That'll be a big addition back to that offensive line. He missed last week with a concussion, but he was in the red non-contact jersey on Wednesday, so that seems like he's progressing through the concussion protocol. He'll be back at that right guard spot. That's going to help him a lot, but this running game has to be a lot better. They had, 56 yards rushing week 1, and they only had, I want to say, maybe another 50 on Monday. It's just not enough. They need to be up there 80, 85, 90, over 100, whatever the case may be. It's got to be a lot more production in the running game. And then third, defensively, they've got to create a couple turnovers. Right. I mean, again, I go back to it's all about the ball. And when the Raiders are doing really well, I thought their defense did a good job against the Chargers. I'll only hold them to 20 points. And the Raiders threw an interception on the very first play of the game, spotted the 25-yard line to the Chargers, and the Raiders defense held them to a field goal. So that was good. Yeah. But they didn't come up with any big interceptions, give the team short fields. They need to do that as well. They need to protect the ball. They need to take the ball away, and they need to establish the run game. I think it's that simple. Those three different paths, those three different keys, and they can find a way to get a dub on Sunday. What do the Commanders need to do?
Yeah, bro, I'll tell you that first interception was wild. I was like, bro, my wings aren't even on the plate yet. Like, what are we doing out here?
Man, it was sudden change. When you hear sudden change on the sideline, something bad has happened, and that's what the Raiders were yelling on Monday night.
Yeah, 100%. For the Commanders, man, I think you got to test those edges, right? I'm with you. Like, I agree with you. Like, I watched the Raiders game. I think that number certainly is inflated, but I do think that perhaps there's still some opportunity there. And this Washington Commanders offensive line is athletic. I think part of the potential silver lining for having Marcus Mariota instead of Jaden Daniels, if that is what happens, is that you can run a little bit more straightforward of a rushing attack, right? Like, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds of it, but as an offensive lineman, when you have a read option on, you make your initial block, but then you kind of have to read the defense because you don't know what's happening behind you. You don't know if the back got the ball, the receiver potentially on a crossing, or the quarterback kept it. And you have to kind of read the defense. Okay, it looks like they're going left. We're going right. Now we got to find another block, find something to do. Straightforward run, you just know where you're going. You can get to the second level faster because you have confidence in what your assignments are, and that can maybe play into the hands of the Washington Commanders offensive line. And Marcus Mariota, again, not Jaden Daniels by a long shot from the athleticism standpoint anymore, at least, but certainly can still do a little bit of damage on his own. So try to exploit that, see where the weakness lies in that if you can. And then the great thing, and I hate to pick on Devin because I love my guy, but if you make Devin White look like Devin White of old, you get him move in one direction too often. That's when you hit him with the play action. Maybe you roll away from it, or even if you just drop back from it, you run a tight end behind him, or you sneak a receiver behind him. And Devin likes to get lost in the sauce a little bit in those situations. You might be able to exploit him for a big gain. Discipline. The second thing has got to be discipline, man. I mean, this team is committed way too many penalties. I know last week they actually had fewer penalties than the Green Bay Packers did, but that was the situation where it's quantity versus quality. The quality as in the negative impact that the Commanders' penalties had on them versus the negative impact the Packers' own penalties had on them, much different. Like, that's where the scales definitely tipped. This Washington Commanders defense, or not defense, the entire team just has to be better from a discipline standpoint. I'm kind of looking at Marshawn Lattimore. For one, he hasn't had like the greatest play to start the season as it is, but when you're adding on penalties, it just makes the whole thing look a lot worse. And then force Geno into those mistakes, man. Like, Geno he's throwing the ball into double coverage. He's kind of it reminds me of like Taylor Heineke. F it, Terry's down there somewhere. Like, Geno is like, F it, there's a Raider down there somewhere, but there's also a Patriot down there. There's also a Charger down there. Like, there's also multiple defenders down there at times. And look, if he's going to start to play that way, and I don't know, and obviously every week is a chance to get that fixed. But this defense is not forced to take away yet this season, and that is not Dan Quinn. That is not Joe Witt Jr. That is not how they want to play. So they got to go out there and get a takeaway. Q, obviously I'm being hyperbolic when I said this, but I said on my show that if they don't get a takeaway against Geno Smith, just the way that he's already played these first 2 weeks, if I'm Joe Witt Jr. at the end of the game, I'm saying, dude, don't even leave the field. Don't take your pads off. Leave your helmet on in front of these fans and everything before they even leave the parking lot. We're running gassers. We're just running because that's ridiculous. And that's not a jab at Geno either. It's just like you said. That's the way he's playing right now. Yeah. So if that's what he's going to do, you got to take advantage of it.
Yeah, no, he's turning the ball over, right? And he knows better than that. I mean, he's talked about it. He's got to protect the ball. He's got to be smarter. He's got to be more efficient with it instead of just, getting impatient and trying to do too much. He's got to stay within himself. And so, he might have been a little too hyped up on Monday. I don't know. But those 3 interceptions, none of them were good. They all were pretty ugly. They all were preventable, and he didn't. So, no, I don't blame the Commanders. If they say, well, look, everyone gets the interception but us, or they get a takeaway but us, what in the world's really going on? So, I can see. I'm not mad at that. Gassers for everybody if you can't get a turnover. Maybe the Raiders should implement that as well. Nothing wrong with that.
And as far as the Raiders trying to get Ashton Jeanty going, man, I mean, obviously very talented back. Hasn't worked out the way that he wanted to early on in the season. But, look, Dietrich Wise Jr. being out on that right end spot. Javonte Jean-Baptiste is the guy who's listed as the starter right now. 7th round pick, second year in the league. They brought in Preston Smith. We'll see how fast they can get him, ramped up and what kind of shape he's in, and whether or not they elevate him for the game, all these types of things. But if you're going to do it, that's probably the spot that I think the Raiders attack first. But you also have Javon Kinlaw, who can play inside, outside. So the Commanders have a few tricks up their sleeves too. But I think the biggest thing, man, is just both these teams identifying their inconsistencies. How do they address them, specifically in week 3? Because you don't got to be better than everybody in week 3. You just got to be better than the Raiders or the Commanders, depending on what side of this matchup.
Well, and the other thing is, I think these 2 head coaches know each other pretty well. Right? Yeah. I think there's some history there with Pete Carroll and DQ, right? I think that they know each other. Pete Carroll told us, I like going up against him. He's fun, right? So I'm sure that they're going to have a nice little inner rivalry between the two. Not quite like Carroll and Harbaugh, but it'll be fun because of the respect that those two have for each other.
Yeah, this one's a friendly rivalry, but
exactly. Yeah,
you still want to beat your friends, right? Like, you want to beat your enemies, but you still definitely want to beat your friends.
Absolutely.
All right, folks, that's going to do it for this Crossover Thursday episode. As always, you can find me on X at DHarrison82. You can find Q on X at Yourboy Q254, and you can also hear him on Raider Nation Radio 920. You can check me out on WUSA 9 your local DC CBS outlet. And of course, make sure you're following both Locked On Commanders and Locked On Raiders on YouTube or wherever you're listening to today's podcast. The NFL season is in full swing. So for your second listen, make sure you check out the Locked On NFL podcast. Tyler, the Madman Rolling, gives you a morning shot of espresso every morning. Tony Wiggins is bringing you back for the real talk and the barbershop vibes every afternoon. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube, wherever you're listening to this podcast as well, to the everydayers of both Locked On Commanders and Locked On Raiders. We see you. We appreciate you. We thank you for coming through yet again. Until next time, everybody out there, please be safe, be kind to one another. We'll see you again soon. For your boy Q, I'm David Harrison. This has been Locked On Commanders, Locked On Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.